The hall was ablaze with light, crystal chandeliers scattering gold across polished floors. Waiters cut through rows of white-clothed tables with silver trays stacked with delicacies I couldn't name. I paused at the threshold, both hands around a small wooden box, the one my wife used to keep tucked beneath the linen chest. Inside lay the necklace, her thin chain, worn but gleaming, and the modest pendant she wore on our wedding day. It was meant for our daughter now. When I stepped forward, heads turned, perfume and laughter thick in the air. My boots, clean, though cracked from years of soil, made no sound on the marble. I reached the head table where my daughter, Grace, sat beside her groom, Andrew Drew Bennett. Her cheeks were painted, her smile trembled. I set the box in front of her. "This was your mother's," I said quietly. "She would have wanted you to wear it today." For a heartbeat, silence. Grace's fingers brushed the lid. Before she could lift it, the groom's father, Richard Bennett Sr., leaned back in his lacquer-bright suit, wine glass spinning between his fingers. "A trinket," he scoffed, loud enough for nearby tables. "At a wedding like this? Security, please escort this old man away. He's mistaken our table for a roadside tavern." 2 guards moved. Grace froze, torn between shame and fear. Heat rose in my chest as their hands found my arms. I didn't resist. They led me out, my feet dragging against polished stone as if the earth itself tried to hold me back. In the courtyard, music still throbbed through the walls, laughter spilling into the night like wine. I stood alone, clutching only my hat now, the box left behind on white linen. The cold cleared my head. I'd known humiliation before, but this cut deeper, not for the rich man's words, but for my daughter's lowered eyes. And yet, could I blame her? She'd grown up with little, and now she was promised everything she once dreamed. My wife, Ellie Whitaker, died when Grace was 6. I remember the morning, wet earth, her hand slipping from mine, the sudden stillness in the house. From then on, it was just the 2 of us. I worked the land my father and grandfather had, dawn to dusk, season to season. Wheat, potatoes, a small orchard that threw shade in summer. Nothing grand, but enough to keep food on the table and books in her backpack. I never remarried. Some called it foolish, said a man can't raise a girl alone. But each time I watched her braid her hair by the window or recite lessons while I sharpened tools, I knew Ellen's steady spirit lived in her. That was reason enough to go on. The necklace had been Ellen's mother's before her, Margaret Maggie Foster. Ellen wore it when money was tight and when it wasn't. "It's not about the gold," she once told me, lifting the pendant to the lamplight. "It's about carrying love forward, woman to woman." When she died, I wrapped it in cloth and locked it away. I'd been waiting for the day. I thought this was it. Years rolled by in toil. I saved what I could, though the farm rarely gave more than it took. Some seasons, hail flattened crops, other times, machines broke and I fixed them with wire and prayer. But I didn't complain. Grace grew tall, her voice as clear as her mother's. I taught her to drive the old tractor, to prune the orchard, though she loved books more than tools. At night, I read contracts and property guides by the lamp, teaching myself the world's words so she wouldn't be cheated. When she finished school, I told her, "The land is yours if you want it." It carried us this far. But she dreamed of more, cities, universities, the highway that ran beyond the fields. I gave her my blessing. What kind of father keeps his child tethered to furrows? Then came the groom. Polite at first glance, too polished, a handshake soft as butter. His father, a man of means whose voice filled a room and whose eyes measured everything as merchandise, stepped carefully around the mud when they came to the farm. "Why live in this museum?" he asked. I smiled and didn't answer. To them, the land was dirt. To me, it was sweat, memory, and roots. The wedding plans began. They wanted grandeur, hotel ballroom, orchestra, a photographer flown in. I offered what I could, the orchard strung with lanterns, tables spread with bread, wine, and roast meat from neighbors' kitchens. A wedding isn't about gold, I said, echoing Ellen. Grace's gaze wavered. She wanted to belong in their world. I emptied an old savings jar, enough for a modest gown and small comforts. Then came the serious demands, a prenup with a deed transfer, signatures, the farm listed as part of her contribution. That's where I drew the line. I won't sell my land for spectacle, I told them. This land is the only dowry our family ever kept. That night, back at the kitchen table scarred by decades of meals and homework, I opened the drawer with my papers, deeds, receipts, tax bills. Among them lay what I hadn't touched in years, the family trust document Ellen and I had signed when Grace was small. Ellen insisted on it, the land must never leave the family. Even if we're gone, she should know it can't be given away lightly. I agreed then to please her. That night I understood her wisdom. The ink had faded, but the clause was clear, no sale or transfer of the farm without the joint consent of both parents, the settlers and co-trustees. Ellen's signature steady and fine, mine rougher, a farmer's hand. I'd carried it as a relic. Now it became a shield. At dawn I drove my old Ford pickup into town. Storefronts were just waking, brooms scratching at thresholds. I stopped at Evans and Partners, attorneys at law, the modest office of my friend from the service, Mike Evans, the man who'd once patched my arm in the barracks and later patched up farmers in court. He adjusted his glasses and read the trust slowly. A smile tugged at his mouth. "Oh, it has power," he said. "Recorded, valid, and binding. No title company will close, and no county recorder's office will record a deed without the trustee's consent. We'll keep your scene, if you want it, at City Hall, make it public and clean. But be ready, men like Bennett don't give up." "I've weathered storms," I said. "This one I can't outrun." By evening a black car rolled up my drive, tires spitting dust. Out stepped Drew and his father. They didn't bother with greetings. "We need to talk," Richard said, brushing dust from his sleeve. We stood beneath the walnut tree where Ellen used to shell nuts. I stayed standing, arms crossed. "You made a scene last night," he said flatly. "We're willing to overlook it, for Grace's sake. Sign the prenup, house, land, everything passes to the couple. A natural step. You can stay here, of course, until," he smiled thinly. "Until you no longer need it." "And if I refuse?" He leaned closer, voice dropping. "Then you'll find yourself alone. No visits from your daughter. No grandkids in this yard. Do you want to die without seeing them?" Drew spoke then, softer, almost pleading. "It's not so bad. Think of it as securing her future. Isn't that what you wanted?" I studied him, charm without backbone, a mouth full of his father's words. "Her future doesn't need your money," I said quietly. "It needs her mother's blessing. This land is her mother's voice." Richard's eyes hardened. "Very well. We have other ways." That night Grace came. Simple clothes instead of silk, eyes red from crying. "Dad," she said, "why must you fight them? Why not let it be? I'll still love you, wherever we live." Her words cut deeper than threats. I wanted to promise peace. But peace built on surrender rots fast. "Child," I said, "they don't trade in love. If I give them this land, I give them your roots. One day you'll wake up a guest in your own life." She wept. "Will I lose you?" "You'll lose nothing," I said. "But I won't give what isn't theirs." The next morning, County Clerk's Office, Marriage License Bureau. The hall smelled of flowers and perfume. Jordan Collins, the clerk in a pressed suit, lined up papers on a polished desk. Grace stood beside Drew, pale. Richard hovered like a shadow. I walked forward, boots echoing on tile. Conversations faltered. Richard's voice went cold. You've caused enough disgrace. I turned to Grace. Do you remember your mother's words? Love isn't bought. It's carried. The clerk cleared his throat. We're here to issue the license and, as noted, acknowledge the prenup. I set my folder on the desk. The sound cracked the room. That agreement is invalid without the trustees' consent. 20 years ago my wife and I signed a family trust. It's recorded with the county. It states plainly, no transfer without both parents' consent. Her hand is here, and mine is here. Without the trustees' consent, this farm stays where it belongs. Whispers rippled. The clerk read, brows knitting. Richard flushed. Nonsense. An old scrap of paper. The law. The law, the clerk said evenly, recognizes this trust. We don't handle property here, but I can tell you no title company will close and no county recorder will record a deed without the trustees' written consent. The marriage can proceed. The property transfer cannot. Drew stared at his shoes. Grace covered her mouth, tears bright. The musicians in the corner lowered their instruments. The illusion cracked. I didn't gloat. I'd come for truth, not revenge. The ceremony moved on with a strange thinness to the applause. Richard left early with 2 men in dark suits. In the weeks that followed, he tried once to challenge the trust in county probate court. Judge Karen Morales dismissed it in minutes. After that, his name rang less proudly in town. There was a price. The couple moved into a modest city apartment. Richard's calls turned curt, then rare. For a time, Grace's letters to me grew careful, guarded. Neighbors whispered that I'd been harsh. Others clasped my shoulder, like Nick Walker, my old neighbor, stand firm, Sam. If you fall, they'll come for us next. I bore the quiet. I kept the papers locked in the cabinet but didn't need to look at them. Truth had done its work. Seasons turned. The orchard bloomed, wheat bowed, and the fields answered as they always had. Grace began visiting more, first alone, standing by the trees as if listening for something she'd lost, then withdrew, awkward among cows and soil but trying. Years slipped by, counted not in days but harvests. My hair went white, my hands slowed. Their children, Liam and Sophie Bennett, ran the rows, laughter snagging on branches like bright ribbons. Through them, her distance softened. One evening, after the kids fell asleep, Grace sat with me at the old table. The lamp laid a warm circle over the scars in the wood. Her face, older now, was Ellen's face. Dad, she whispered, for years I thought you ruined everything. I was angry. But now, I see you saved me. If you had signed, I'd be trapped. Instead, you gave me what money can't, a place to come back to. I rose, opened the drawer, brought out the wooden box. Set it in front of her. I tried to give this once, I said. Wrong moment. Now I give it again, not for show, but to remind you, love is carried forward, not bought. She fastened the necklace. The pendant caught the lamplight, just as it had on Ellen's wedding day. No chandeliers, no humiliation. Only a father and daughter, bound by what endures. That night I wound the kitchen clock. It has always run a minute slow. I'd never fixed it. Maybe because it taught me patience. I set my hand on the case and listened to it tick. Dignity, once trampled, can rise again, not with noise, but with peace. And in the quiet I finally understood the measure of a home. Not in acres or market price. In the moments you kept your light burning, even when someone tried to put it out. The snow outside fell in a fine hush, the kind that settles as if it doesn't want to disturb the earth. It was Christmas Eve. Windows along the street glowed warm, strings of colored bulbs blinked lazily. I had just set the kettle on when the doorbell rang, and I felt it in my bones, something was wrong. Dad, Ethan said as he stepped in, smiling the kind of smile that makes a room colder. "We brought you a gift." His wife, Lisa, stood behind him, polished, composed, already certain how the evening would go. They set a neatly wrapped box by the door. Ethan rubbed his hands together, produced an envelope. "A ticket," he said. "A beautiful place just outside town, meals, doctors, full care. You deserve comfort." I unfolded the paper. "A private assisted living facility. Signatures. Dates. Paid 3 months in advance. You want me to move there?" I asked. My voice was steady, though something inside tightened. "Of course," he said brightly. "We'll worry less. And this apartment, so big, just sitting empty. It doesn't make sense to waste it. We could live here, handle everything." For a second, I saw a boy of 10, skinned knee, hair a mess, the boy I once taught to fix a bicycle. That boy was gone. "You really think I'd be better off there?" I asked. He looked away. "It's reasonable, Dad. It makes sense." I set the envelope on the table and slid my hands into my pockets so he wouldn't see them shake. The evening proceeded as if nothing had happened. I offered tea, they declined. "We're in a hurry." At the door, Ethan patted my shoulder. "Just think about it, okay? They've got great conditions. We want you comfortable." When the door closed, I stood a long time by the window. Snow thickened, glowing under the streetlights like sparks. The room was quiet except for the old wall clock, Ann's father's clock. I sat, took the envelope again, studied seals and signatures. No. Not a gift. A trap. They wanted the apartment. A renovated place in the center of town. My first wife and I had poured 30 years into it, one socket, one nail at a time. She used to say, "What matters most is that the home stays a home when we're gone." I smiled for the first time that evening and whispered, "They won't get it. Not from me." Sometimes life doesn't test you with pain, it tests you with betrayal from those you once called family. If you surrender then, you don't just lose walls. You lose yourself. And so began another story, how an old man stood his ground, calmly, lawfully, with dignity. I met Ann when I was 23. She worked at the library not far from the shipyard where I was a machinist. She smelled faintly of paper and ink. She wasn't loud, never tried to impress, but when she looked at you, it was as if she saw the man you could become. We built slowly, brick by brick. This very apartment was our first real home. We painted the walls ourselves with cheap brushes that shed bristles, we laughed anyway. "It's not the paint," she said. "It's who's beside you while it dries." And couldn't have children. The house felt too quiet sometimes. But we had each other. When she died 15 years ago, the silence came back heavier. She left a note in her round hand, "Don't let the house grow cold. Fill it with kindness again." 2 years later, I remarried. Vera, a good woman, practical, kind in her way. She had a son from her first marriage, Ethan, 16, sharp-tongued, impatient, always on his phone. I saw myself in him at that age, though I never had his chances. I tried to help him. He wanted to study business. I sold my old car and part of the cabin lot to pay his tuition. I figured if I helped him stand, he'd carry forward what I couldn't give. Money never mattered much, I had my trade, my tools, my hands. Vera died 5 years ago, quietly in her sleep. After the funeral, Ethan stayed a while, polite, subdued. He called me Dad, not stepdad, not Mr. I believed that word. But comfort changes people. When he married Lisa, things shifted. She spoke to me with the polite distance reserved for strangers on a bus. Their visits thinned. And when they did come, Ethan's eyes searched not for approval but for opportunity. Still, I fought bitterness. It eats the one who carries it. But when that gift arrived on Christmas Eve, something inside me settled, not anger, but clarity. That night I walked the rooms. The walls held Anne's laughter, Vera's voice humming over the kettle. The kitchen table wore knife marks and coffee rings. The old armchair creaked the same way it always had. A house full of echoes, and promises. I opened the sideboard drawer and pulled out an old envelope of photographs, Anne and me on the balcony with paint on our faces, Vera and Ethan at the lake, his hand gripping a fishing rod too big for him. And folded among them, a yellowed sheet, the marital agreement Anne and I signed before we bought the apartment. I'd barely thought of it in decades. The memory came like a light through fog. The agreement was clear, the residence at address is the separate property of Robert Mason. Back then I didn't know it would become my shield. I only felt near, calm, steady, as when I lost my way. Near midnight, fireworks popped far off. You were right, I whispered. What we build honestly, no one has the right to take. I'd spent years giving, savings, labor, trust, and now saw how easily people forget the hands that lifted them. Still, I didn't regret it. Regret is only wishing for a different past. I would keep what remained, not just the apartment, but the dignity within its walls. Morning brought gray light and cold that hummed in the pipes. I half hoped Ethan would come to his senses. He didn't call. A week passed. Then two. Only the mailman came, cheerful kid who liked football and once helped me with my phone. Then the phone rang. Bob Mason, a familiar voice said. It's Victor Hale, remember? From the old paperwork days. Victor and I served together. Later, as a lawyer, he helped me with documents now and then. A steady man, honest eyes. He came by for tea looking uneasy, coat still on. People keep coats on when they carry words they don't want to say. Bob, he began, I wouldn't tell you this if it weren't serious. Your stepson came to my office asking about guardianship, conservatorship over an elderly relative. Said you're showing cognitive decline. Wanted to know what he'd need for power of attorney to manage your property, in your best interest. I sat quiet, the clock suddenly loud. What did you tell him? That it's not simple, and courts require medical proof. He didn't like that. He asked about faster options. Victor slid over a card. Get your papers in order, deeds, medical notes, any wills. Don't sign a thing without counsel. When Victor left, the apartment felt smaller, as if the walls were listening. I didn't sleep much. I heard Ethan's voice on a loop, you'll be better off there, Dad. By morning I knew what to do. I opened the cabinet with my records, shipyard habits never left me. Deeds, contracts, receipts. And there, the marital agreement, and signature beside mine, clear as daylight. I made certified copies of everything and took them to Victor. I want my affairs airtight, I told him. And I want a written statement that I'm of sound mind. He smiled, tired but warm. Already prepared. When I signed, the trembling stopped. Not anger, clarity. I wouldn't fight Ethan with emotion. I'd fight with paper and patience. 3 days later he arrived with a clipboard and that cold confidence. Just routine medical forms for your benefit, he said. On top, consent to guardianship evaluation. I didn't take the pen. Sit, Ethan, I said. Let's talk like men. He hesitated, then sat. I told him what Victor had said. A crack showed in his composure. So what if I asked a few questions, he snapped. You're getting older. Someone has to think ahead. Think ahead, fine, I said. But not by declaring me unfit to live in my own home. He stood, flushed. You don't understand how the system works anymore. I'm protecting our family. Our family. I kept my voice low. And made this a home with her hands. Vera kept it warm. Now you call it yours because it's convenient. Enough, he muttered, gathering papers. A few documents won't stop me. No, I said. But the law will. And I'll stand with it. After he slammed the door, I felt only tired. There's a fatigue not from age but from disappointment, when someone you raised decides your years are a liability. Small things followed. A letter from social services asking if I needed assistance with daily living. A call from a clinic I'd never visited offering a routine senior evaluation. Polite traps. A neighbor, Lydia Monroe from the second floor, caught me by the elevator, flustered. Your stepson came by, she said. Asked if I'd noticed you forgetting things. I told him you're sharper than me on my best day. I thanked her, then went to Victor. He's building a case, Victor said. Document everything. Keep copies. Don't discuss your health without a witness. I'll file a preemptive statement of competence. If he petitions, we'll be ready. So the quiet war began, waged with signatures, stamps, and silence. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I made 2 duplicate keys, gave one to my niece, Allie Brooks, my late brother's daughter, sharp, kind, not afraid of confrontation. I'll testify, she said. He won't steamroll you. Ethan tried again. Let me manage your finances, temporarily. You already tried, temporarily, I said. Remember the guardianship papers? I forwarded every official-looking letter to Victor. Then one afternoon he slid a new paper across his desk, petition for guardianship/conservatorship. Court date in 3 weeks. County probate court. All right, I said. Then we prepare. We gathered evidence, property deed in my name alone, the marital agreement with Anne, utility bills, renovation receipts, a letter from Dr. Alan Levin confirming I was fully competent in managing my household. Allie and Lydia agreed to testify. Piece by piece, the case turned. On the eve of the hearing I stood on the balcony. City lights shimmered in the frost. Somewhere in that glow was the boy who once fell asleep on my shoulder after his first fishing trip. I couldn't protect that boy anymore, not without losing myself. The courthouse smelled of paper and varnish. Ethan sat with his lawyer, I sat with Victor and Allie. The judge, a woman in her 50s with clear, steady eyes, read the petition, request for guardianship over Robert Mason, age 73, due to alleged cognitive decline and inability to manage personal affairs. Ethan's attorney spoke of concern, public safety, financial oversight, sketching a frail old man lost in his past. Ethan didn't look ashamed. Only certain. Mr. Mason, the judge said. Your response. I stood. Your Honor, I spent 40 years as a machinist. With steel, precision matters. If you rush, someone gets hurt. My stepson here is rushing. I laid out documents. This is the marital agreement between me and my late wife, Anne. Notarized, recorded. The apartment is my separate property. Here is the deed. Here are bills and service orders, signed and paid by me. And this is a medical statement from my physician confirming I am of sound mind. The judge reviewed, then turned to Ethan. Any evidence to the contrary? He swallowed. We only want what's best. He's been forgetful. If remembering the address on my own deed is forgetfulness, I said, then I'm guilty. A ripple of laughter loosened the room. Allie spoke plainly of my routines, the taxes I still helped her with, the workshop I volunteered at. Lydia told the truth, warm and firm. The judge leaned back. Silence gathered. Then, petition denied. Mr. Mason is competent. No guardianship is warranted. The gavel's soft knock sounded like the first warm wind of spring. Ethan's face went pale. His lawyer stacked papers quickly. I turned to Ethan. You could have come here as family, I said, not unkindly. Instead, You came as a stranger. That's the real loss. Outside, the air was bright and thin. Snow drifted like dust in sunlight. Allie hugged me. You did it. No, I said. We did. And we did it right. After the hearing, calm settled like quiet after rain. Victor brought a small box of chocolates, for a man who remembered what's his. Ethan wrote once, printed, formal. He was leaving town. A misunderstanding, he called it. No regret. I folded the letter and put it away. Pity, not anger. People who chase walls forget that homes are built of love, not square footage. Allie kept visiting, sometimes with her little boy, who filled the rooms with noise. The neighbors talked. Some said I'd been harsh. Others called me the old man who beat a guardianship petition without raising his voice. I laughed. That's not the story I want told. What is? Allie asked. That a man should know the worth of what he builds, and defend it with proof. I fixed hinges, oiled the balcony rail, started carving again, small wooden birds like the ones and used to paint. Shaping wood brings peace. Patience and pressure, balanced, create meaning. One evening Nick Walker from the next building clapped my shoulder. Stand firm, Bob. If you fell, they'd come for the rest of us. The city slipped toward New Year's. I hung the old garland across the window, half the bulbs dead. Imperfection has its own beauty. Allie's family came by with a little tree. We set it near the balcony where and used to grow herbs. We raised tea in chipped cups. To new beginnings, Allie said. No, I smiled. To keeping what's worth keeping. After they left, fireworks flowered over the roofs. I looked at my hands, calloused, veined, steady. They'd built homes, fixed engines, held 2 wives, raised a boy not of my blood but once my son. Those same hands had defended what mattered, not just walls, but the story within them. I wound the kitchen clock. It has always run a minute slow. I'd never fixed it, maybe because it taught me patience. This time I nudged the minute hand forward, just once, until it matched the hour exactly. Dignity, once trampled, can rise, not with noise but with peace. And I finally understood how a home is measured. Not in market price. In the moments you kept your light burning, even when someone tried to put it out.